Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to 13 things from the 1970s kids today will never understand. This should be a nice little nostalgic throwback for some of you watching this video, and for me, finding out new things that I never really knew about. I guess things that you would use on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully going to enjoy. And again, hopefully this is a nice little nostalgia trip, I guess like you could say, for some of you watching this reaction. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's check this video out. Links are in the description to my Patreon, where you can see reactions that I can't post to YouTube. TV series, movie reactions, all that good stuff. Links are there for those interested. And let's just jump into this video and see some of these things that maybe I'll know some of them. I assume I won't, but yeah, let's jump into this.
There are some things that are unique to the decade that we grew up in. The 1970s was no different, having a distinct style that is easily recognizable, even to newer generations. But aside from the obvious disco and bell-bottom trends, there were more minute details that people living during that time will easily recognize. So here are 13 things from the 1970s that kids today would never understand.
Let's see. When he says kids from today will never understand, does he mean people like me? Like, I'm not a kid, but I'm someone who grew up in a completely different era, right? Or does he just mean like 8-year-olds from this generation? I'm going to involve myself in that. I'm not a kid, but I will involve myself in the group of people that he's aiming this towards. AKA the kids.
Options for watching TV were very different during the 1970s. For one, there were really only 3 TV channels plus public broadcasting. That's right, just 3. No streaming services, no endless options. You'd also have to get up and manually turn the dial to change channel.
See, that's the thing I wouldn't even think about as well. You'd have to get up. I guess it's this thing here, right? This one of these things. These little knobs. I don't know which one's which, but... Or this thing here, maybe. I think this turns it off. Or turns it on. I don't know. One of these things here. Damn, you'd have to get... I mean, in these times, it's a privilege, right? To have a TV in itself. I mean, maybe not in the 70s. I think 60s and 50s, it's more of a privilege. Even the 70s, it might have been. Maybe it was a privilege to have a coloured TV in the 70s. Is that the case? I think most people would have had TVs, but to have a coloured TV in the early 70s, would that have been a privilege, or was that quite a commonplace? Maybe in the 60s, I don't know.
It was a time in which we waited for our favorite shows, which included nightly shows that were popular and Saturday morning cartoons. It was a big deal when you could pour a big bowl of cereal and binge hours of your favorite animated shows. But with the limits...
I love that he says that, like, because I would have spent my childhood doing the same things just in 40 years later. Like the late 2000s, the early 2010s, I would literally, like, he literally just spoke to me, like, as if I was there living myself. Because I used to just eat cereal on a Saturday morning, no school, eat cereal, watch cartoons, I'd usually watch like sports shows, because I never had like the channels where you could watch the live sport, so I'd watch shows where it would just talk about the sport. Actually, maybe that was when I was a bit older. Yeah, just watching cartoons, eating cereal, that was my ideal thing to do as a child, to be honest.
Options on the television. It's no wonder kids spent so much time outside. Well, that and the fact that some parents made their kids go outside and play.
They went there a long time.
During the 70s, making a mixtape was an art form. It took patience and dedication to sit by the radio for hours, waiting for the right song to be played. It didn't matter how good your timing was either, because pushing down the play and record buttons at precisely the right time still sometimes had the DJ talking over the intro. And that was just part of the charm.
Imagine you missed by like 2 seconds and you missed the start of the song. I bet that would frustrate the hell out of people.
Cassettes had their quirks too, like when they got tangled and you would have to use a pencil to wind them back in. Cassettes made it pretty easy to create what we know today as a playlist, and this was the first time we could listen anywhere we wanted.
Jeez.
Did you ever run around the house and pretend you were Superman or Batman? Well, if you did during the 1970s, then you most likely had on a pair of superhero underoos. For many kids, they served a dual purpose. They were underwear and part of a costume when you were strutting around the house, feeling invincible. Superhero underoos were more than just clothing. They were your identity, especially the ones that matched the actual superhero outfits. Nowadays, kids can never appreciate their underwear in the same way.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Recollection Road is proud.
Oh, they're secure in the bag. They're secure in the bag.
Preserving your loved one's stories in a beautifully printed book, which makes the perfect gift. Visit lifestorypro.com/recollection to get started.
Do it, I dare you.
During the 1970s, record stores were not just places to buy music. They were social gathering spots. Just like the mall of the 1980s, young people would hang out with friends, browse through vinyl records, and even listen to albums before they purchased.
So would these be like stores that you would stay in, like certain groups of people would stay in for like a few hours at certain points in the day or certain days? Obviously not every day, but would there be like sections in these where you could like sit down, or would it just be the store and you'd just be standing up looking through the records or listening? Or would there be like seated areas where you could chill and do that sort of stuff? I guess maybe it just differed from place to place, right?
Just them. Store employees at this time were also music.
Like, I love this jumper. This jumper is retro as hell, but this jumper looks class. Is it the New York Jets?
Enthusiasts, and they would recommend hidden gems. It also wasn't uncommon for you to strike up a conversation with a stranger who was into the same music as you. So the local record store was a special place, and yet another experience that is hard to replicate today. Hitchhiking during the 1970s was...
God damn. Thank God this is not a thing anymore.
Surprising.
I mean, if it is a thing, people will still do it, but I feel like maybe in these times it was a lot more common.
Surprisingly easy and acceptable. It was very common to see people thumbing a ride on the side of the road. Drivers would often not hesitate to pick up hitchhikers, and it was seen as a way to help out a fellow traveler. There was more of a sense of camaraderie on the open road back then, and that's hard to understand in today's world. But it wasn't without risk, and there was still a chance you might encounter a few weirdos, and that was just part of the fun. Nowadays, it's
that was part of the fun. Jeez. I mean, look, people would get free rides, but there would also be stories where horrible things would happen. So, I mean, this is probably one that's... I would say it's quite good it's been phased out. Again, it's not completely... People will still do it, somewhat. But obviously, I guess in these times, it was a cultural thing to do. It's just a lot more common.
Illegal to hitch free rides in many places. But back then, it wasn't unusual to find a service member, a student, or even a hippie thumbing for a ride. When you think back to the 1970s, men had some serious style. They had manly mustaches, sideburns, big hair, and that distinct aroma of aftershave wafting around them. It was all about the macho look, and men took their grooming pretty seriously. This was also coupled with some pretty bold choices in clothing too, and as long as you could leave a couple of buttons undone so you could show off your hairy chest, you were good to go. Nothing quite matches the swagger men had in the 1970s.
Well, that's the thing, like, things go full circle. So, like, for example, like, the mullet hairstyle has sort of come back into fashion, right? A lot of people have it. In the UK, I mean, a lot of younger people have it. I guess it's probably the same in the US, right? So things do come full circle. So I assume certain styles will come back and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's just how it sort of is with culture. I don't know why, but... So I'm assuming some of this stuff probably will... I mean, maybe there are some people that dress like this still. But, like, for younger people, they'll probably start dressing like this as well.
And speaking of grooming...
I mean, he looks like he's from a flipping... What's the word? He looks like he's from, like... I've not watched Pulp Fiction through. Is Pulp Fiction the classic sort of gangster film? I don't know if it is. I'm going to say he looks like he's from Pulp Fiction, but I don't know if Pulp Fiction is the film that I'm thinking of.
Ladies, too, had their own unique products to give them that 1970s look. Sun-In was all the rage, promising sun-kissed highlights. Women would spray it into their hair and head outside hoping for those perfect golden locks. And who doesn't remember the smell of Love's Baby Soft, a signature scent from the 1970s? The sweet, youthful fragrance was a defining smell that had all the girls wearing Baby Soft. But I'm not sure the ad campaign would fly today. When the telephone that hung in the kitchen rang, it was always answered. This was before caller ID, so people had no idea who was calling. Can you imagine? You didn't know if it was your best friend or a sales call, which meant there was a chance that you might recognize the voice on the other end and spend some time getting twisted up in the phone cord while you talked. Or you might be yelling across the house to let someone else know the call was for them. Today's kids might find it unbelievable that we willingly picked up the phone without the slightest clue as to who was on the other end.
That's how it was.
To best capture the moments in the 1970s, you absolutely needed a Polaroid camera.
See, this is a thing that I mean has gone full circle. Although I don't know if Polaroids ever went out of fashion, because they're one of those sort of unique the cameras that they print out the pictures straight after. I assume they probably never went out of fashion, but these are still very popular and very expensive because people just love the idea. And they're quite cool, to be fair. I mean, it's pretty fascinating how they can take a picture and then instantly print out the picture. Obviously, you have to like wait a little bit for the picture to sort out, and you have to wave it or whatever. I think these like pictures are way cooler and way more meaningful than just taking one on your phone, right? Because if it's just on your phone gallery, obviously you can save more. You can take as much as you want, really. You can take as many pictures as possible. But these are a lot more personal, and I do like Polaroids, to be honest.
The idea of hitting the button and instantly getting a picture developed was gratifying, but you had to be selective because each roll of film only had a certain number of pictures.
And the film costs so much. Isn't it like 20? I think it'd be like £25 for 20 picture things, just like this. Like, they ain't cheap.
And then there was the practice of shaking the picture to help it develop faster, which was just a myth. But you couldn't take the bulky Polaroid camera with you everywhere, so there were also photo booths that were strategically placed where teenagers congregated. Places like arcades, malls, and roller rinks were ideal, so best friends and couples could capture the day with a series of goofy and fun pictures. If you were to step back in time and visit a 1970s kitchen, you'd probably find a fair share of mushroom-themed decor.
Really?
Mushroom plates, mushroom curtains, mushroom wall.
Was it the magic mushroom era? You know, like the peace era, having your magic mushrooms, and then people love mushrooms. I'm joking, but that is a bit weird that mushrooms were just the craze.
Paper. They were everywhere. Everything back then seemed to have an earthy aesthetic, and mushrooms must have been the perfect fungus to represent that style. I guess you'd call it charm, and every corner of the room seemed to be inspired by it.
Damn. The mushroom.
As you waited for the weekend and that special morning of cartoons, you also needed a sugary cereal to help you enjoy it. The 1970s was all about finding the best surprise toy inside the cereal box. Kids would beg their parents for a certain brand of cereal, not because of the taste, but because of the toy. It may have been a silly game or a small figurine, but it was like finding a treasure when you dug down to the bottom of the box and pulled out the prize. This excitement made morning cereal more than just breakfast, which is much different than today. Opening a beer or soda can in the 1970s was a bit different than...
So, I feel like I've seen these before. Would opening these ones be a lot less of like a click sound? It would just open a lot sort of smoother?
What we are used to today.
These ones here.
You'd pull the ring back and peel back the aluminum tab.
Oh, you'd peel it. Oh, wow.
And back then, most of the tabs were just tossed on the ground. These sharp pieces of discarded metal were a nuisance, especially on beaches or places where you might walk barefoot. These pull tabs were just another hazard that we faced, and the tops would change shortly after to the more familiar stay tab that we recognize today. But it was still all part of the fun of living in the 1970s.
Damn.
Last but not least, school lunch in the 1970s wasn't complete without a trusty metal lunchbox and the matching thermos. These lunchboxes not only showed off our favorite characters from pop culture, but they often also had their fair share of rust on them too. Any ding or scratch would quickly rust over, and our parents didn't seem to mind either. Remember the smell of opening a metal lunchbox after a long, hot day? Kids today, with their ice packs and insulated lunch bags, will never fully understand what it was like.
So when I was a kid, I never had a lunchbox. I always was just given a plastic bag.
To grow up in the 1970s.
When I was a bit older anyway.
Let me know in the comments if I missed anything.
Well, there we go. Oh, wait, is there more? Oh, it's the ad. He's getting his money. This is a month old, so I don't think the ad's still in play. But it's secure in the bag. You'd love to see it. It saddens me to think how our children and grandchildren will never feel the America we had in the 70s. I think the biggest difference is that a working father could afford a car, a house, and feed his family. The mum, if she worked, did it for nice extras and usually only worked part-time. See, in like the 70s, like what percentage of women would have worked? Because obviously now it's pretty even, right? It's just how it should be. But like in the 70s, what sort of percentage of women would work compared to men? And when did this all change? Did it just sort of gradually change over time once the sort of laws were changed, or the rules sort of changed, and like sort of the whole view on it changed? You know, I guess from like the late 50s is when it sort of all started to change and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, like in the 70s, early 70s to late 70s, what was sort of, I guess it's not really probably like known, but what would be the sort of the percentage of women or mothers that would be working? I'm interested by that. As a kid growing up in the 70s, it always seemed like there was something wrong with me mentally and emotionally, but compared to the last couple of generations and their twisted attitudes, damn, bro, so much hate towards people. When I was in high school back in Hawaii in the 70s, looking back in retrospect, I have a deeper appreciation of the 70s girls and women. No tattoos, natural. But let people do what they want to do. I mean, at the end of the day, no tattoos. I have no problem with tattoos. I don't have any, but natural hair. But he just mentioned highlights. Nice makeup. I mean, to be fair, I can get behind that to a degree, but at the same time, things change. No body piercings. I have no care if people have piercings. I just think that's a bit of a weird comment, but yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this reaction. Let me know your thoughts. It's cool looking back at these things, and hopefully it is, again, a nice little nostalgia trip for you from this era as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.